and welcome to the Trellis Seminar Series 2022. For those of you who don't know us, Trellis is the charity that supports therapeutic gardening in Scotland, providing information, training and good practice sharing. We aim to promote the highest quality therapeutic gardening services and enable everybody to get the best out of them. Trellis also encourages gardening groups to share experience, skills and resources through a network of over 480 gardening groups. You can find links to all information and resources online on our Trellis homepage. So just a quick summary of the session today. We will have a presentation which will last approximately 50 minutes. This will be followed by the opportunity to ask questions and have a discussion. So please use the chat feature throughout the session to ask questions, and we'll voice them to the presenters at the end of the Q&A, at the end of the presentation and the Q&As. You can also use your reaction button and raise your hand during the question and answer session, and we'll invite you to unmute and voice your question to the presenters. We have enabled closed caption and live transcripts. You can turn on the subtitles at the bottom of your screen. You'll see the CC live transcript. You just need to hit enable. If you don't have that, there will be 3 dots on the right of your screen. If you just click on them, you should see the live transcript there. So near the close of the session, we'll invite you to complete our survey, and we'll post a link in the chat. The feedback is important to us, so please, if you can, take time to complete it. But don't worry, if you miss the link in the chat, you'll receive a follow-up email after the event with a link to the survey. So it is a real privilege to introduce our speakers today. Johan Leemons, Kathleen de Klerk and Miriam Cook, who will be presenting in Flanders Fields, Tales of Gardening in Flanders in Prisons and Other Settings. So a little bit about our presenters today. Johan Leemons is the head of Occupational Therapy course in the University of Applied Sciences PXL, which is in Hasselt in Belgium. He's also a lecturer and researcher in occupational therapy, an expert in horticulture therapy, and policy advisor in a rehabilitation centre. With Kathleen de Klerk, who is a practical lecturer in green management at the University of Applied Sciences PXL, and she's been doing that since 1996. He coaches students of green management specialisation and projects related to therapeutic greenery. Since 2014, Johan and Kathleen have been working together with a non-profit organisation called Therapeutic on interdisciplinary projects related to horticulture therapy and therapeutic greenery. We have Miriam Cook, who is currently the institutional head of the Leuwen Central Prison. She previously gained experience as a director in the Mechelen, Turnhout, Hasselt and Leuven prisons. The Leuven Central Prison is the example in Belgium in the fields of therapeutic greenery and horticulture therapy. Their therapeutic garden won the European Award of Ecological Gardening in the category Gardens for Healthcare and Therapy in 2021. So we're going to start off today by watching a short video, and then Johan will start his presentation. So we're ready to play the video.
Good morning to Alice. Thank you for the invitation. We were very pleased to do this conversation with you. I will tell you something more about greenery and detention in Flanders. But you already have seen the award-winning Therapeutic garden in Leuven. just to come into the context. Greenery and detention in Flanders. I will try to explain something more about that. I have made a small index for you all. We will have some information about greenery and detention, and then we come to the practical issues, the projects we have with our partners, the completed projects, also the projects in progress, and the planned projects. So it's a nice story I have to tell you. First, greenery and detention. First, greenery and detention. This is very important. There are two architectural forms of prisons in Belgium. We have the old prisons, we can call them the old prisons, and Leuven is an old prison. It's designed in 1860, so it's very old. And there's something special about it. It is star-shaped, you can see it on the picture, but there was a special person, Duc, and he was a little bit visionary. He believed in prison as a punishment, but also prison as a rehabilitation place, a place for rehabilitation. And so he was a little bit the godfather of this issue I'm going to tell you about. They are mostly in the urban context, but the new prisons, I will show you in the presentation further on about Hasselt, is more in the rural context. Yeah, and you see there's very much concrete at that place. Good. And I told you, I forgot something else, especially Duc, it's a kind of sidekick, but he was also the first, he invented the Belgian flag. So we are proud about that person. Good. Effects of green and detention. We started with research in 2014, and there was a very interesting study in the UK. And I'm sure mostly the people you know this big research, but nevertheless, some summary of this research. In the study of the UK, we see effects of green and detention for personal development, self-esteem, self-awareness, responsibility. We see also effects on relaxation, less aggression, stress reduction, and we see also, yeah, and that's what we are doing in this specific settings, developing professional skills and work attitudes. There are also some social competences involved with it, and physical effects. But, and that's a big issue, at this moment, we are working with students in a lot of settings, students of occupational therapy and students of green management. And I think it's a very important issue that in those contexts, we need more qualified personnel. For example, therapists, but also students of professionals of green management. And also the prison architecture is sometimes not easy to install this kind of ideas we want to do. And this slide is showing a lot of things. You see that in an environment of a prison, it's a very hard environment. And if you see it to the right side, psychologically, you see a very big impact of a green healing environment. Just to say something of some issues, meaningful green activities, they are very important in this context, and I will tell you more about that because I did some research about these issues. Cooling aspects, sensory stimulation, and so on. I'm not going to tell them all. In Flanders, we have an organization, a very strong organization, Therapeutic. We work together with this organization with the PXL University College. And we made a schedule, some schemes. And you see, and that's very important in this slide, we see an aspect of doing, garden therapy, but we see also an aspect of being. And at the right, above right, you can see what we are meaning by doing and being. We have a strong doing component and we have a strong being component. A strong doing component, and you see this also reflected in, for example, activities, and mostly it's done by students of occupational therapy at this moment. And we see also a therapeutic greenery, a more being component, and that's done by the green manager students and also my colleague Kathleen. But the strength of this all is coming together. You have to have a being component and a doing component, and really the strength of this project is the combination of students of occupational therapy and the students of green manager. And myself, my colleague Kathleen and myself, we are the researchers who are now doing research about vocational training with inmates in prisons. So this is a very nice and interesting slide. And I thank also Herman from Therapeutic for making this for us. Good, how we work. We have a special work schedule, and that schedule it's mainly based about participation. Participation is the key word of everything. We are going to start with a very important analysis. We are going to analyze the wishes and the needs from the stakeholders, but also to analyze the needs from the environment. Then we start with the design process. Then the landscaping is going on, and then the use of the garden and evaluation. And you see all those facts are very important, and they are working together. And for example, analyzes wishes and needs. I will present further on how we are doing that. Analysis for environment, that is also the aspect Kathleen is doing. And the therapeutic use of the garden at this moment is done by students of occupational therapy in different settings. So this schedule is a little bit a keyhole, a stronghold for the work we are doing. Good. The project we have with our partners. Now we are going to some practical things. We have completed projects in Wortel, that's also a prison in Belgium, and in Leuven. We have projects in progress in Hasselt, also a prison, Leuven, and Merksplas. So it's a big range, and we are very proud about that. Completed, and that's something nice. We have really some results of our actions. And in Wortel, we had a group of 40 inmates, and we did a follow-up of those 40 inmates, and the inmates were selected by the prison. They have difficulties about they have mental problems, psychological problems, and also social limitations. The group was followed up 2 years, and after the 2 years, they had a certificate where they can show soft skills and also some horticultural hard skills. But we go deeper in the research, and I followed up 9 inmates for 2 years. 9 inmates for 2 years, and there was a theory about people in prison about executive dysfunction. There was a research in 2018, and why I am saying this now, we try to work with the inmates and we try to improve their executive skills. Executive skills, I will say a step further on, they are very important to the daily behavior of people, the daily handling of people. And we have seen by the inmates an improvement of executive skills, higher self-esteem, meaningful daytime activities, and better work attitudes. And we used, as an occupational therapist, we used the occupational therapy intervention process model. And on the next slide, I'm going to show you results of a person G, and you can see after period 1 and after period 2. Just so, let us say in the project, we work with students. They are 7 weeks in the environment, in the jail, in the prison. Then there's a follow-up by a volunteer, and then there's again students of 7 weeks of occupational therapy who are there. And if you're now seeing to the results, and that's very nice, then we used a checklist of executive functions, of executive skills by Dawson, made by Dawson. And you see to the left the points of the students, and to the right the points of the volunteer. And then you see a very good progression after being in the garden and trained and do activities in the garden in small groups of 4 persons. Every group was 4 persons. And then we see self-regulation, a very strong improvement from 7 to 14. And the end result is, the higher result is 15. We see also self-regulation progression, sustained attention, planning, time management, and metacognition. That are very important skills when they go back to the economy. Those kind of executive functions you really need when you're doing a job. And the work of inside the garden, of the therapeutic garden in Wortel, yeah, it shows this kind of results after 1 year of participation. So That's very important to say. So there's really an effect, a positive effect of working in the garden on executive skills. Good. In Leuven also, we had a second project, Therapeutic Garden, but Miriam will tell you more about this place, this special place. Also inmates with a mental disability and psychological problems. Here was the aim to go from a bare plane, from a place where there's no sensory stimulation, to a therapeutic garden that adds values in various areas of daily life. And also there, a very beautiful combination of green management students who did an inventory together with Therapeutic, and afterwards students of occupational therapy who are using now at this moment the garden. So the movie you have seen is that beautiful place. That is also just to say, but we have also heard it in the introduction. It's an award-winning garden, an European award-winning garden, and of course we are very proud of that. In progress, still in progress. In progress is Hasselt, another place, and there we focus on the outdoor space of the visitors complex, and we try to improve the parent-child relation. The parent can be a woman or a man, but the main focus is here attachment. Attachment is here the main focus, and we try to build a place where they can work together, where they can play, where they can be together in a normal, beautiful place. But to create that, we do the same. Always participation is base, is the keyword, participation, with all the stakeholders involved the direction. I have to say a different thing also. With the stakeholders, we included inmates and also the people who work with the inmates. And the design is made by those stakeholders. The construction will be done by the inmates. And also there for the construction, we try to improve work attitude and we try to improve the professional skills that they need when they go back to the normal life. And also maintenance is of course important afterwards when it's already done, when it's made. There you see the design. It was made by the prisoners. It was guided by Therapeutic, and students of green management are making the drawings. And at this moment, now they are working with an occupational therapist student and inmates to create and to start the garden. And just some images at the right, they started very small, but very small stones will make at the end a great item. Good. Another place, Merksplas. It's also in progress. We focus there on a pleasant and therapeutic living environment. Also the role of green as an experience and also create activities. And I told you already about participation, but participation is the keystone. But of course, participation is joined by interviews and so on. And by using interviews, we are based on the meaningful activity methods. It's made by Cornelis and other people. And we are always asked, an activity has a special form, has a special function, but also a personal meaning. And working with that kind of interviews is giving very good results. Mostly the inmates are not used to do interviews, or they are sometimes they give answers they give, but not the real answers that we want to hear. But by this method, you can see that the outcome is a very good and wonderful outcome. The background of this all is based on the shared decision making. For example, you see some interviews, but also we use some mood boards. We have a lot of inmates, you don't have the verbal skills, and therefore we use like mood boards like this. Here you can see it better. Mood boards done by, they use magazines and so on and so on. But the result of the interviews, I also want to show, because I have some nice answers. Inmates by doing an interview, there's a lot of people are saying, it makes me feel happy, self-esteem. I feel useful. It's also very important, self-esteem. I feel useful after a lot of years. Now I feel useful because I take care of something and now I take care of myself. Escape from reality, a kind of feeling of freedom. I would like to work in the garden daily. The day structure is also a very important thing. A form of freedom, a feeling of freedom, learning to take care again. That's what I just told you. Learning to take care again. Of learning to take care for the very first time. Take care of your food yourself. Also, an important thing is we have the process of the therapeutic garden, but the outcome of the therapeutic garden is not only the soft and the hard skills, but it's also the crops we have and what we are going to do with them. And also relearning work attitudes. Productivity is also important, and that's our research. Relearning work attitudes and respect agreements. What we are planning in Hasselt for the next step, maybe a professional nursery of permanence. I don't like the pronunciation, but also there, learning hard skills and soft skills. That is what we are going to try to do next. And in the Bolsburg, that will be another setting, another prison. We are going to try by making a new prison already involve green by the starting of the building of this prison. And we divided green in visible green for the cells, the living areas. We try also to involve usage green for sport activities, exercise, walking, also conversations, meetings, reading. Care green is also or meaningful activities, and we try to make therapeutical horticulture in that, but also, and that's the research Kathleen will tell you more about it, vocational green. So at this moment, I'm going to stop my presentation. It's a very famous prisoner in the garden, Nelson Mandela. Therapeutic is using this PowerPoint always, and I think it's very meaningful, the words that Nelson Mandela is saying. Okay, I hope you enjoyed my presentation. I will give now the words and the second presentation in the hands of my colleague, Kathleen de Klerk. She's my colleague since 2014. She is a practical lecturer in green management in the same university college as myself. So Kathleen, please enter the arena.
Hello, thank you, Johan, for introducing me. I started to work with Johan 8 years ago. Educated as a landscape architect, I was interested in everything green and nature can offer to people. Certainly when it is good for their health and their well-being. So, of course, garden therapy and how to optimally organize a garden for an occupational therapist is a branch that needs research and needs research. How surprised was I to hear that people in prisons are also people with needs. Weren't they in prison to be punished? But the more I got a chance to know people in prison, the more I understood why they are in need and why a garden is good for them too. Because I think, Johan and I think that the more people in prison can work in a garden, the bigger the chance is that once they come out, they will not commit a crime again. And so they can be good neighbors for you and me. And that's the reason why we do this all. So 2 years ago, Johan and I started a research project because in which we attract students of occupational therapy and greenery management at the same time, at the same work placement. We want to find out what are the soft skills and the hard skills that are needed by the greenery companies, enterprises. We search for the differences in needs for skills in social economy and in normal economy. We want to know, for example, if the need to take good care of garden tools and machines the taking care of it is more important than, for example, the practical experience with pruning a lead lime tree. Is there more need to soft skills or more need to hard skills? So there was a lot of interest in gardens for prisons, and the reason was Leuven, of course, and Wortel, and the success they could see over there. So there was a big demand for new gardens in other prisons. But Johan and I wanted first to know what are the keys to success for a garden in prison. So a student of greenery management did more than 140 surveys in the prison of Bruges by inmates, and to know when is a garden good for you. And then the outcome is 10 keys. And those are all verbs, and the verbs have something to do with sensitivity or something to do with activities. And that you can compare very well with our being and doing in a therapeutical garden. Our students then did sent surveys to companies, to greenery companies, to know what they needed. Do you need more soft skills? Do you need more hard skills? But we also did interviews, and we plan to do more interviews with social and normal economy enterprises. And we already have some results. And here are these results. At the first place, if you let them put it in a ranking, it is necessary for an employee to have a driver's license if he wants to work in a greenery. He must love to be in the outside in all weather circumstances. He must pay attention to order and neatness. He must be motivated. He must have respect for material. So you can conclude that the driver's license is a hard skill, and all the other things are soft skills. Actually, you can say you just have to love your job as a gardener. So Johan and I think for now that it is important or very good to offer self-study courses in prison. For example, a book to learn to practice and to learn for the theoretical part to get the degree to get the driver's license, but also small books like the book on the left side, how to prune scrubs, for example. So they already know a little bit of the terms they use in the greenery. But much more important is to offer the opportunities to work on the soft skills. That you give in prisons possibilities to offer the soft skills like working together. You see on the right a picture of two persons planting scrubs together, and they have to work together, or they do work together. So they work on teamwork as a social skill, or pruning on the left side. And of course, while they are practicing in those soft skills, they can do it by practicing in the hard skills in the meantime. Sometimes ex-inmates aren't ready to the real world yet when they are free. Sometimes they still have problems with drugs, for example. And therefore, there is a nice program at Catharsis in Genk. It is a center for addiction treatment where they can stay for 18 months. To learn to cope with their problems, to resist the drugs they are offered everywhere, always, when they want it. But they need to make that choice themselves, and they have to learn it in 18 months. We see in Catharsis too, that it is very good to work in a garden, to work on those problems. So Catharsis asked for a restoration plan for the garden. And this is what you see now. And they started to landscape with that plan. They started to landscape the garden. And what you see now on the left is a greenery house that is sponsored by a service club. At the left, you also see a vegetable garden with small pots between the borders. And you see a gazebo. That gazebo was already in the garden, but not at that place. So 6 residents took initiative and removed the gazebo. So they had to work together. They did not only make the garden at that moment, but they also worked on the soft skill working together. On the right side, you see a garden house. It is a time out room when they have a problem and they want to solve that problem in private. So they can go to that small place. And so the garden is growing little by little. So happiness grows together with the fruits, and every harvest feels like a victory. Johan had the chance to follow one person who was first in prison, then stayed in Catharsis, and now he is working as a volunteer at the local green service. So he keeps on growing and gardening, and it brings him the distraction that he needs, and to not go back to the drugs again. Easy plants are the experience to successful gardening, the possibility to be proud of goals you can achieve, and to show to your family what you have reached already, and also be a role to others that who stay in the house. You can imagine the feeling of a resident if he can cultivate leek the second year he is gardening, and if that leek is used in a soup that all the others can flavor that evening. How proud must he be? And this is what makes a garden for this kind of therapy successful. And here too, they work on soft skills more than on hard skills. Catharsis works together with with the famous head of gardens from the monumental vegetable garden of the Castle of Hex. The Earl, who owns the castle and the estate, is very proud and is very positive against the project, because this is also a way to learn people this kind of heritage that gardening horticulture is in Belgium. And for the visitors, the people of Catharsis who go to the garden sometimes and practice there, they are also proud because they can work with a very respected gardener in that castle or in that vegetable garden. And that makes them feel, gives them the possibility to feel that they are worth it again, that they are human again. So ex-inmates can also keep on gardening in their private garden. They can do another job. Perhaps they choose not to have a job in the greenery, companies, but they can still practice in their own garden if they have it. Johan and I haven't researched yet what is the impact of an own private garden for an ex-inmate, but it seems to be very valuable. But if an ex-inmate really likes to work in the outside, isn't afraid of a rainy day or a cold day, and he wants to work outside all the time, he can take it as a profession. There are plenty of greenery enterprises waiting for them if they only have passion and persistence to never go back to the prison again. The employers of Belgium are even prepared to lead up the employees for the hard skills. So what we think the future for prisons can be is to cooperate with plant nurseries and greenery enterprises. There are already workplaces in a lot of prisons where inmates can work. But we think now about plant nurseries and on the unused parts of a prison. And we can assure that there are a lot of unused parts in the Belgian prisons. Those parts are big enough to train the parts are big enough to train the so needed skills. The point of departure for all of this is that we are convinced that the biophilia theory of Wilson, which says that everyone is attracted to other living species, is very important in prisons. We can see that in the movie The Shawshank Redemption, where an inmate takes care of a little bird, and taking care of another species gives him hope. So we are sure, we are sure that the biophilia theory works everywhere, also outside of the prison, and that may be the point of departure to continue the good way, the good chosen way. So even if ex-prisoners or ex-inmates don't garden anymore, they can still study nature and plants or take pictures of them. Perhaps we can start with a project, what we call the prisoner's science, and they can start by studying the plants that grow on the old walls of the Duc Pitiot prisons in Belgium of the 19th century. This all is necessary to create less recidivism. That's what it's all about. Everyone has, once free, the possibility to choose between committing a crime again and go back to prison, perhaps, or to work peaceful in the garden and enjoy what nature offers us every day. And he knows that it does what it does with him because he had that experience already in the prison and after he came out of the prison. So we hope in this way that we can change a little thing and that ex-inmates can live in the society with all of us together again. But that's not all more green in a prison can offer. More green in a prison is also good for the whole neighborhood, also for the people working in the prison, but also good for the neighborhood. Because we keep in mind that this kind of old prisons is located in city centers where is a lot of soil sealing. So the heat island effect is big there. We must take every chance to create more green, also in prisons for the neighborhood, to cool down the city. It is also a place where we can do some experiments, which the functionary of Leuven, for example, doesn't dare to do. These are small places who can be very hot in the summer. So we have a changing climate and we do not know, landscape architects, we do not know all the plants that will survive in this changing climate. So we have to experiment with some plants. But a functionary in Leuven, for example, he doesn't dare to try this in the public place of Leuven because the inhabitants of Leuven have high expectations of all the green in the public places. So he is not permitted to try something and perhaps fail in it. But when we try trees in prisons, that is a very nice place to have some experiments. That brings us to the place we are so proud of, and that is that garden in the prison of Leuven. No one can tell you better about that project than Mirjam Koeken, the institutional head of the prison of Leuven. Her persuasion made it possible to make a garden where no one could imagine a garden. And now she has a fan club. You may call her an influencer in the world of prisons. Here is her story.
So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. Thank you very much for your kind words, Kathleen, but I think you are overreacting about us. My name is Mirjam Koeken. I'm the governor of Leuven Centraal, a prison in the city of Leuven. And before I introduce our garden, I would like to tell you something about this special prison. So Leuven Centraal is not a detention house, it's a prison for long-term prisoners. It is a star-shaped prison, like Johan already mentioned, very old. It was built in 1860, and we have 6 wings in this prison. One wing is reserved for classrooms, meeting rooms, and a library, even a small theater. But the 5 other wings are inhabited by more than 400 inmates. As I told you, the prisoners are all long sentenced. That means more than 2/3 of our population has a sentence over 10 years. We're talking about sentences 10, 20, 25, 30 years, and almost 50 of them are sentenced to life. Because they are staying as long with us, we have a specific regime. We don't have an overpopulation. It is 1 man, 1 cell in our prison, and the cell doors are open from 6 a.m. in the morning until 8 in the evening. And of course, we have a lot of static security, like walls, like camera security, like wires, alarms. But we emphasize on the dynamic security, which means that our staff members are encouraged to interact with the inmates. As the doors are open all day, there is a lot of interaction, a lot of conversation between staff and inmates. And the purpose is, of course, that we know who is staying on the wing. We know when he has a problem. We know perhaps when something starts to happen. So dynamic security is essential in an open regime. Now, one of the 5 wings was renovated at the beginning of 2018, and it was completed. It was a wing with 100 cells. Attached to this wing, there was a walking area. And we thought, first of all, we want to divide our population. We want to segmentate our inmates, spread over the 5 wings of the prison. And we wanted to reserve the B wing for a group of inmates without any behavioral issues, without any disciplinary problems. We had 3 divided floors, 3 sections, and about 33 of those inmates without disciplinary problems were put in 1 section. The other group were the inmates with a weaker personality, a low IQ, inmates who often didn't leave their cell, and they couldn't cope with the pressure of the surrounding of the other inmates. The 3rd group was a group with psychiatric problems, with psychological problems. We all have more and more inmates with severe psychiatric problems. So 100 inmates were spread over 3 sections. And next to this renovated wing, there was a courtyard, a walking area. Now, together with dividing our population, and we wanted also transform this courtyard, because in prison courtyards, walking areas are walls, electric wires, cameras, and concrete soil. There is a lot of stone, no green, and we were thinking about changing this concrete walking area. And at the same time, we heard about a small project of vegetable gardening in the prison of Wortel. And that was led by members of Therapeutic in assistance with PXL Hasselt, the university college. So we thought, okay, let's take contact and let's try to make something of our concrete courtyard. Together with Therapeutic, we wanted to start with a therapeutic garden, especially for those inmates with weaker personality and the inmates with psychological problems. We learned from our companions that participation is essential to create success. So, of course, we listened to them, and we tried to involve the inmates, the prisoners, during this process. When you have the participation, when you have the involvement of the users, when you have the participation, that creates a larger involvement of the users, and you create really our garden for the prisoners afterwards. It is also important because they use the garden, you don't, and it's possible that the non-users miss some essential elements, so they can advise you what's important and what's less important. So this participative model, we took it on 3 levels. First of all, the inmates made a design. They decided what was important in their garden. And secondly, they constructed the garden. And finally, after the garden was finished, the inmates of the B wing had the responsibility of maintenance of the garden. First, we started the design phase. Over a period of 4 months, we had 5 long meetings with, of course, Herman and Chris from Therapeutic, with student trainees from PXL University College, management and staff members of Leuven, and a representation of our population of the prison. So 6 inmates were selected from the prison population, and they made the original design. Staff verified for the feasibility and the security, if it was possible to create such a garden as designed by the inmates. Now, what was important? First of all, the first target was enjoy. They wanted to enjoy. They want to smell, see colors live. As I told you, they were all long sentenced inmates. So when you are several years in prison, you only see stone, concrete, and for them it was very important to see color and life and green. Secondly, they asked for peace. They want to be alone. They want to go away from the crowd inside the other inmates. And on the third place, walking and gardening was also for a group of them very important. Of course, they wanted the same things as we all want. They want plants, they want flowers, herbs, they mentioned fruits. They wanted also some sitting areas, a nice view, and paths, not very right paths, but widening paths, and a smoking zone apart, and shelter for the terrible rains of Belgium. And that is the final design they made. You see, it's not a rectangular shape place, the walking area has a strange shape, but that is the final design, which is made by the inmates, by the prisoners. Then we had a trainee student from PXL University College, and he made this plan out of the design from the inmates. He made a very good and detailed plan. He even made, he added some pictures of the kind of plants and the kind of flowers we had to buy. He detailed per square meter how many plants we had to plant. So it was a planting plan he made with flowers, with plants, but also with fruits. So we have a grapevine, we have berries, and we have a fig tree, which we have planted in the garden. So when the design and the plan of Jasper, the student, was made, we started the construction phase. And this phase also took more than 4 months. It was an excellent summer. I think we had 4 months of sunshine, which is exceptional in Belgium. 10 inmates worked on a daily basis and supervised by 1 staff member. We had a budget from €7,000 and a donation from a Sera Bank of €2,000. And for the city of Leuven give us 2 tons of free compost. But the inmates, they had to work by hand. They had really dig out all the concrete surface. Unfortunately, I didn't took the first picture, so you don't see the concrete surface at the beginning. The first pictures we took was already in July, after several weeks of digging with jackhammers, with shovels, not like the movies. They just had to work by hand and dig it all out. So this is already in July. We constructed already the round forms, the round shape of the thing. You see in the middle concrete construction in the ground. We made some pots with gravel, and this is the compost we put in the garden. On the left side, you see a picture of something we found in the underground. By digging out the concrete, we found a lot of tiles of blue hardstone, Belgian blue hardstone, very expensive. I think that in the 19th century, if they had garbage, they just put it in the ground and put some soil on it. So we digged it out, and with this blue hardstone, we made our terraces. You see here different terraces, different sitting areas for the inmates. This is already the end of October, so we are in the final phase already. And this is pictures. These are pictures of the final result. We had some benches, terraces, and we also put climbers against the walls of the prison. Of course, this was in 2018. Now it's a lot bigger already. So this gives you an impression of our garden. And the last phase of this involvement of inmates of this participative process is, of course, the maintenance. Since October 2018, we had again the opportunity to have a student, a trainee of PXL Hasselt, Maxime, and he made a maintenance schedule. The inmates of the B wing are responsible to maintain the garden, and until now it's a great success. There is a lot of involvement and a lot of prisoners who stay there wants to help and clean and help in the garden. Now, this garden is a therapeutic garden. It is, we created nature between the walls. It brings tranquility, it brings peace. We like to have a lot of birds, and it is for the inmates really an oasis in the life of in the prison. The garden. What is therapeutic about the garden? First of all, it's the garden itself. As I mentioned before, normally you see a lot of concrete and a lot of stone in prison, but this gives a nice and calm view for everyone who can look at it. Now, by finishing the garden, it wasn't finished, because once you start a project, then new ideas come up. And of course, we went on. To start with, we made a construction petanque court. The inmates requested it, we did it. We also expanded our garden. You have a security perimeter against the outer and the inner wall. It's there is a place, that's a place with camera security, and it's not allowed for inmates to come there. And in most of the prisons, there is a lot of grass. There are grass lanes, grass squares. And now we are replacing those grass by flower beds. We took contact with the beekeeper, and we want to make flowers all over the prison. Also, we plant some smaller fruit trees, so inmates can get those trees. Of course, it's not for the whole population, because, as I mentioned, it is a secured place. It's only for a few of them, but it helps also, we hope, its measures against global warming. And we try to do a bee project and attract bees to come to our prison. But also, since 2018, there were new ideas. We had inmate therapist sessions in the garden. We had staff members who asked, can't we have lunch in the garden? So the interaction between inmates and staff was even increased. We had a volunteer which organized composting workshops, and now we have 2 volunteers who started to guide some of the inmates with vegetable gardening. So it is a never-ending story. I'd like to thank you for your attention, but I want to take the opportunity to thank especially Herman and Chris from Therapeutic, and Kathleen and Johan from PXL University College, because without them, we would never in the world have such a beautiful garden. And I'm aware that I have to be humble, because it is a very, very small project, and it inflects just 100 inmates of our prison. But I can assure you that this very small project has a large impact, because of course I invited my colleagues, I invited my bosses, and as Johan and Kathleen already mentioned, I think that almost every prison in Belgium now asks Therapeutic and asks PXL to help them to green their prison. Even more, the Justice Department in Belgium decided that when we build new prisons in the future, in the near future, there are a couple of prisons which are planned to construct. When we build them, we have to take gardens in those prisons. So no more concrete, but more gardens and more green in the prisons of Flanders. So thank you for your attention. I don't know if you have any questions for us. You can ask.
Thank you. What a transformation in the garden. I'll now hand over to Fiona, who will do the question and answer.
Thank you, everyone. That was incredible. Wow, we have a lot of questions and comments, so I might hand over to some of the questioners, but I think I'll start with a couple of simple ones that may have been partially answered already by your presentation. We did a project with prisons here in the UK too, so we have a special interest in this area and lots of questions. First of all, Jenny's asking, which categories of prisoners do you work with and how are they selected or referred for gardening in the prison? It's kind of partially been answered, but I think you could say maybe some more.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had in total, I think 20 inmates were took part of working in the garden. Yeah, the selection, we can't select because they are all, we have all long sentenced inmates. So I think we choose them by behavior. So people, a lot of prisoners, the big part of the inmates don't have any or just a few disciplinary problems, and those were the ones we selected. Of course, they were volunteers. We didn't tell them to do it. Okay.
Thanks. And building on that question, Joan was wondering, is being selected or referred considered a reward, and do other inmates who don't manage to take part in the prison show any anger or negativity towards those who are selected?
I think in the beginning, some of them were jealous because we have, in our prison, we have 3 walking areas. So now we have a small one attached to the B wing, and that is the garden. The 2 others are just concrete walking areas. And we had, in the beginning, the other inmates asked to, of course, start with the garden on the other walking areas, but it is too big, and perhaps in the future we'll see. But after a while, it's no, it's just in the beginning that there is some jealousy, but later on it's gone.
Thanks. And Joan was also wondering, do the occupational therapy and green management students physically work with the inmates, or do they do the planning at a distance and then the prison staff work with the inmates?
The students of occupational therapy and green management, they are really involved in the prisons, and they are also doing a clinical stage there, clinical placement, but it's also a combination by a thesis. They also write a thesis about that subjects. So it's a combination of practical things and theoretical things, but they are really in the prisons with the inmates. Yeah. And they stay there for occupational therapy. Mostly the students are working together with three students, and mostly they are staying, one student is staying 7 weeks and the other student is the next 7 weeks. There's also a period of 7 weeks, but they are really working with them.
Good, thanks.
Perhaps I can tell you something more.
Sure.
For us, it's not so exceptional because, as I mentioned, our cell doors are open all day from 6 in the morning till 8 in the evening. So everyone walks next to each other, and a student or a trainee is nothing exceptional for us.
In the prison of Wortel, it was a little bit different. They worked only with 4 or 5 people together, and the inmates were selected by the psychological services.
Okay.
So just not more than 5 inmates.
Okay, thanks. Jenny was commenting that the modern prisons there look similar to the new ones here in Scotland. And Joan also asks, the stakeholders and the prisoners really are given such a lot of consideration. Do prison staff embrace working with them and in the gardens, or is it seen as hard work in some cases?
The prison direction, the staff.
In our prison, it are really the inmates who work in the garden. as I mentioned before, we had questions from the staff to get lunch in the garden and to use the garden in summer. But we work with volunteers who come in and give workshops to the inmates, and it are the inmates who did the maintenance of the garden, not the staff members.
And in Wortel, for example, we worked with students, and then after the 7 weeks periods, there was always a volunteer who was there 2 times a week. Sometimes 1 time a week, it's depending about the season, but mostly 2 times a week there were sessions there.
Thanks. I'm going to jump some of our questions and come back to them because I want to sort of give some of the non-trellis people a chance to ask questions. Sally Sillers is asking, who conducts the interviews? You mentioned interviews about during the consultation phase to get ideas about the gardens. Who conducted those interviews?
Yeah, Therapeutic is guiding the sessions in the beginning, for example, in Leuven. And that was with the stakeholders. But when you go to the inmates themselves, in the second phase, for using the garden, we try to do the interviews by the meaningful activity method. I told you already that that's a special method, a special type of interview, and the students are doing that with the inmates. And also we use the kind of mood boards I showed in my presentation. But there are several stages. There was a slide where I prescribed, or I make a description of the participation process. And in the first step, it's with the staff, and then the involvement of the inmates, guided by Therapeutic. But when we are coming to the phase of using the therapeutical garden, it's done by the students, the interviews.
Thank you.
There are
Jenny,
several gradations.
Does that cover your question, Jenny, about meaningful activity and interviews? Yeah, okay, thanks. And Sally also asks, have the staff found a benefit from the garden, just having the garden? I think this is partially answered because we saw in your slides that they've been asking to use it for their lunch, and of course that's a benefit. But have they mentioned other benefits? For example, here we have heard about in forensic medical settings of gardens leading to reduced aggression and so on, reduced staff absence, and I wondered if you noticed some of those kind of benefits.
We like to think about that the aggression, that there is a reduce of aggression, but it's difficult because we selected, of course, also our inmates, which we put on the B wing, and a lot of them were already inmates without any disciplinary problems. We wanted to create a wing without any disciplinary problems, and I have to say that since 2018 we didn't have any. 100 inmates live together and we didn't have zero disciplinary problem at that wing. I like to say that the garden is one of the reasons why the aggression is low, but of course the selection of inmates is also very important.
Thank you.
Can also adjust something. We saw a mind shift also with the staff members who are gardening the prisoners. Some prisoners, some inmates, they were not used to do things. There were people like you cannot do nothing with them. They don't want to go to education programs. They don't want to join other things, and there was a lack of respect for them. But when they are in the garden and they are really working in the garden, you can see a change in attitude. And you see also a mindset, a mind shift of attitude with the people who are guarding or the prisoners. So they are saying they can still do something good. And that mind shift is also very important in kind of prisons we have worked in. Sure.
Thanks. There's a Belgian comment, I think it's a comment rather than a question from Leif. Indrukwekkend, which I have no idea how to pronounce that. in the
Yeah.
chat, but maybe we'll come back to that. Maybe we'll invite Leif to unmute and give his comment.
Indrukwekkend.
We
understand the
we
word.
understand it. They say it's impressive.
Impressive.
There we
Yeah,
go.
it's impressive.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you also for saying that.
Sally also adds a wonderful transformation. Have you noticed more wildlife arrived, and do you encourage biodiversity specifically?
Yeah, we see, I was there previous week and we see much more birds. But we also, they try to bring the bees in the garden. So yeah, you see difference. You see also butterflies.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see more and more life, insects, but also you see also new plants arriving there.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's a new plant.
And
So it's nice to see it growing.
And the nice thing too is that the inmates, they see it. They hoe zeg je, die zien het eigenlijk. They see it, they feel it, they see it, and they say to us when we are there, last week there was a bird here, or there was a butterfly. So they are happy to tell us about that.
So Kathleen mentioned already a new name, prisoner science. I think we can do something with prisoner science.
Yeah.
Some people, they really want to make an inventory about it. They write it down and they want to know what they see. So I think it could be a new idea, prisoner science.
Great idea. It's a great idea.
Thank you.
Federica Cani in Rome says hello. And how many inmates participate in different forms during the life of the project? I know you mentioned 20 for the program, but we also heard they constructed the garden. So
yeah. In Wortel, we work with 40 inmates, but after our work, research work, it's still going on with the volunteers. So I don't know exactly how many people now are involved, but it continues. There's a sustainability. But in Maxpas, for example, the other prison, we did an inventory with all the prisoners there. So, of course, voluntary. If they want to join the project, if they want to join the interviews, it's okay. And sometimes we do it individually, and sometimes we do it in a group. But yeah, at Maxpas, I know from the students, there's also almost 40% of people who joining the sessions. 40%. And I don't know how many inmates there are in Maxpas. But they were saying 400 they are saying. So the staff members, they were saying there's a lot of reaction. There's a lot of reaction towards this item.
thank you. Just a couple of, Federica also adds, the same happens in the Rome prison for women. The cells are open and inmates can walk around their floor. And let's hope that program can start again after COVID forced them to stop. Daniela, who's joining us from Lima in Peru, says this has been a really inspiring presentation, a really humane approach in prisons. So there's another question I want to share from Jacqueline here, and then I want to go back and invite Joan, who worked a lot in prisons with us, and Jenny to voice some of their questions, because they have a lot of interesting questions and comments. Jacqueline asks, is there any plan to do a smaller project with the inmates who are at the other end of the scale in terms of behaviour with the worst discipline, perhaps mindful walks through the garden or short potting up sessions?
Not yet.
Yeah, not yet. At this moment, it's really done by students and it's a research project. But of course, we try to influence the government to go on the next level. But for example, in Hasselt, we work with, we try to focus on attachment between the parent and the children. So a lot of prisoners with children are involved, and they really want to walk outside with the children and to play there and so on. But it's growing. It's growing at this moment. Like several projects, the government asks us, what is the result? What is the benefit? Can you give us exact figures? And now we try to give them some figures. I showed you some figures about executive skills, and they really want to have some information, objective information. But every day we see passion in the gardens. Every day we see involvement in the garden. And now we try also to make a reflection by using skills, by having concrete figures, concrete facts to prove this subjective feeling. But it's not a subjective feeling. It's for me an objective feeling.
We use the garden for individual therapeutic sessions during summer with the inmates I mentioned with psychological problems or very weak personality, low IQ. And during the years of COVID, so last 2 years, we had COVID walks in the garden with those psychiatric patients.
Thank you. I'm just going to hand over, I'm going to invite Joan to unmute because she was the person from our team who did most work directly with prisoners inside the prisons here. And she has a lot of interesting questions. So Joan, would you, I think we got up to your question about if Therapeutica is involved in the design process of actual new build prisons or just the design of a green space within an existing prison. So would you like to just ask some of your questions, Joan? Because I think that's probably better than me voicing it.
Yes, hello, thank you very much. I take it, yeah, I'm unmuted. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Jenny and I did a little bit of work with some of the prisons here in Scotland, and I was just really interested to learn a little bit more about how you do things over there. First of all, the students that worked with the inmates, did they have safety training in advance of working alone with the inmates, or was that not a concern?
The students who are involved in the project and who start in the academic year with their clinical placement, in the beginning of the academic year, we organize a summer school. It's a summer school from 1 week, and they know some theoretical skills and they are learning also some practical skills. But we're also going to visit in that week to prison. And there's an explanation by the principal about safety, about the therapeutic garden. But when they start, they have also an introduction, I think, yeah? And I think yes. You can better explain that.
Yes, of course, the staff members who work on this wing, they know there is a trainee and they keep an eye on them. But on the other hand, in my prison, I have never had any problem between inmates and civilians. Of course, you always have to be careful. We have, of course, a lot of disciplinary problems. I think it's a definition of a prison, but never between civilians or trainees, or never. So I think also because we have that open door system with a lot of freedom within the walls, I think there is always a respect to civilians who come and enter the prison.
Thank you, great. That's lovely. That's really lovely to hear. You mentioned that, Kathleen, I think you mentioned that the inmates comment on the birds and the butterflies. One inmate that I worked with became very interested in the weather. He was always taking note of the weather so that he was aware of the care conditions for the plants that he was looking after. I also wondered, within the prison, does your education department use the garden in any way to support numeracy, literature, perhaps woodworking, using measuring to calculate lengths of wood to make benches and tables for the garden?
It is a possibility for the future, but at this moment, yes, it is.
There they are.
Oh,
yes,
they made those benches, but they are not made of wood from the garden, I think. Yeah?
No.
And that's the next step, I think. Yeah? So you can use products from the garden to create something. Is that what you meant? Or did you mean how to make, for example, banks to sit on?
Yeah.
Is it?
Well, yes, to both of them, but also did you use in the education department? Do you have an education department where inmates can go and learn numeracy skills and language?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, absolutely.
Okay, so did you use the garden as real life projects for numeracy to calculate the length of wood to make a wooden bench?
No, but what we did was they started with a vegetable garden. They have a kitchen on their floor and they made food with
Oh,
the vegetables on the garden. That kind of things we do, yes.
okay.
They made bird houses, maar ik ken het graag werken gedaan in het Engels. I don't know the English words.
Woodcraft.
We have a atelier.
Workplace.
We have a workplace for woodcraft, and they made bird houses. They
Okay.
made benches. That things we do, but not in literature or in the classroom, not yet.
Okay, right.
Maybe I
lovely.
can add something. In Wortel, for example, the other prison, we work with very weak inmates. There are education programs, but the inmates, they have a lack of self-esteem, self-confidence, and we use working in the garden guided by students and volunteers as a kind of stepping stone for another educational program.
Okay,
So by working in the garden, there was an improvement of self-esteem and so on, and the responsibility and again structure in daily life, also in prison. And by using the results of working in the garden, we did a follow-up, also self-reflections, and then it was a next level to go to another education program. So we use it as a stepping stone also.
Mhm.
So we can use it, a therapeutic program in the garden, as by itself, learning soft skills and hard skills, and go and working in the garden afterwards, after the detention program. But it's also sometimes a stepping stone for more, for other education programs.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit
yeah,
both ways.
it's a whole picture, the complete
Yeah.
picture.
Last week they were working on the plan that is made for Hasselt, for the visitor garden, but there was a problem with the scale of the plan. So at the moment they were trying to put the plan on the ground. They said, oh, there's a problem. So they needed a little bit to do mathematics in the garden to count again and to find out the right measures of the garden. So that was an exercise too.
Yeah, great. Absolutely. Okay, I'm going to stop talking, and maybe Jenny, you might want to ask something else. But Miriam, you were thanking the others, the team, for all their good work. But I think the governor shows good leadership and actually allowing the project to take place. So I think that's wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jenny, is there something you want to ask? I'm going to fit in a few more questions from Belgium before we go, but we can come back to Joan and Jenny if we have time. She's shaking her head. She's being very polite. Okay, I want to fit in a couple of Belgian questions. One from Leaf again. I'm probably pronouncing your name wrong, sorry. Are there certain activities that have a special therapeutic effect in your experience?
Yeah, no, at this moment we are really working with vegetable gardens, and vegetable gardens, the process is important, but also the product is important. The harvest, the crops, and we see that the inmates, they have a short time vision. When they do the planting and so on, they like it, but the long-term vision is sometimes far away. And be patient and working together. That's very important. And I think working in the garden, working with vegetables in the garden, it's not only the benefit of the own social skills, but also the own soft skills, but also the social skills are very important. And it's not one thing that is important, it's the coming together of different things that is important. We also work with volunteers in the prison. Miriam already told that, and the inmates really are looking forward to meet them again. They have specific questions. We try to answer these questions, but it's important that we work on personal skills, but also on social skills. And the session is always based on personal and social skills. And when doing the sessions, there's an observation form that students can fill in some observations, but we also do some reflections after the session. and with the volunteers, but also with the students. And I think it's the kind of coming together, all those aspects, they are very important.
And the most popular vegetables are pumpkins
and tomatoes,
because they have quick wins with it.
Yeah.
And leek, for example, is more difficult to cultivate. So that is a purpose for them, a goal, to be able to cultivate leek too. So but now I speak for Catharsis, it's a little bit different, but
we start always with easy crops. So the benefit is 100%, and then we try to make it more specialized. Because, and that's also interesting, it's not mentioned, but there's also a lot of cultural difference in prisons. We have prisoners from Italy, we have prisoners from, more Arabic, and so on. And also we try to adjust our crops to the cultural differences. And that is also very important, I think, because you see them really laughing when you put in some cultural vegetables, for example.
Yeah, those things, we recognize those here. We echo those same things, especially starting with quick crops for a quick experience of success. One of our participants joining us from Victoria in Australia has commented that he recently worked in a project where he designed and built a sensory and spiritual garden in a hospice for aged care in regional Victoria there. And they involved prisoners from a local low security prison to help construct. The benefits to the residents of the hospice and the prisoners were substantial. So that's a nice story to share. Going back to Leuwen now, a question about the environmental regulation and heat control that you mentioned, Kathleen. Do you feel, now that there's a garden there instead of concrete, do you feel an impact on the temperature? Is it cooler in summer? And did you monitor this with best regards from the city of Leuven?
It's not monitored for as far as I know, but the staff told me it is better to be in this part of the prison than in the other parts. So if they can choose where they do their service, they choose for the wing where is the garden. So especially in the warm summers, we were there in 2019, I think, and they said it is very hot, and when we have the chance we come to this garden because it is cooler.
We can also again do it by prisoner science. Prisoner science, why not?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a good project. Joan was also interested in the bees that were mentioned and whether you harvest the honey and whether hens and chickens are kept. You already answered whether the vegetables were harvested and used in the kitchen. But how about the honey and any other animals?
No, we just started with the bees. We are starting now by changing the grass squares by flower beds. We took contact with the beekeeper, but I don't think, I think we can start next year, over here, when everything is planted, then plus we started,
Great.
And, it's a little bit funny, but we started also with chickens and Wortel in the prison. But we had the chickens, we had to put them out of the prison because it was not good for their health. Because in the prison, there's at some places, there's always light. And they get disorientated by time during the light. And we have to set them free. We had to take them out of the prison.
Yeah, understood. Yeah, sometimes it doesn't work. Are there any other questions from the audience? Because we're kind of running out of time now. Are there some that I've missed? Okay, thank you.